There is a saying that many people trying to lose belly fat have heard at least once. Don't eat protein while fasting, it will ruin autophagy. Or a more familiar version, even a small amount will spike insulin, and fat burning will stop immediately. These statements have been repeated so often that they have become a kind of truth within health and fitness communities. But science sometimes has a strange way of making us pause and ask questions. What if the things we have believed for so long are only partially true? And what if the human body does not operate as simply as an on and off switch? Imagine that you have just completed a fairly intense workout, or you have just finished a 14 to 16-hour fast. At this moment, your body is in a very unique state. Many people believe that if you eat anything, especially protein, all the benefits of fasting disappear instantly. However, a study published in recent years has presented a discovery that made many scientists reconsider how we understand metabolism. The research suggested that humans can actually consume a very large amount of protein, even around 100 grams in a single meal, while the cellular cleanup process known as autophagy continues to operate. At the same time, muscles are still able to rebuild and recover powerfully. If this is true, then the way we think about protein, fasting, and belly fat loss may need to be reconsidered entirely. To understand why this discovery was so surprising, we need to revisit the traditional metabolic logic. For decades, the most common model of metabolism has been described like a switch. When you fast, the switch turns to repair mode. The body activates autophagy, a process in which cells clean out damaged components, recycle old proteins, remove malfunctioning organelles, and restore the cell's energy systems. This mechanism is considered one of the most important processes related to long-term health and longevity. But when you eat, especially when you eat protein, the switch is believed to flip into growth mode. At that point, an important molecule in the body called mTOR becomes activated, stimulating the creation of new tissue and the development of muscle. Because mTOR can suppress autophagy, the conclusion seemed simple. If you eat protein, you shut off autophagy. For many years, this idea went largely unchallenged. It appeared in countless nutrition books, health podcasts, and online recommendations. But science always moves forward. When researchers began measuring more precisely what actually happens inside real human bodies under real conditions, they discovered something unexpected. In one experiment, scientists asked participants to exercise and then consume different amounts of protein afterward. One group ate about 25 grams of protein, an amount considered standard in many fitness guidelines. The other group consumed an extremely large amount, around 100 grams of protein in a single meal. According to the old logic, the body would only use about 30 grams, and the rest would supposedly be wasted or converted into excess energy. But what happened next told a very different story. The group that consumed 100 grams of protein did not simply build more muscle. Their muscle protein synthesis also continued for many more hours, compared with the group that ate less protein. In other words, the body does not appear to have a strict hard limit where anything beyond 30 grams is discarded. This actually makes sense when we consider human evolutionary history. Our ancestors did not live in a world of small, evenly spaced meals every 3 hours. They lived through very different cycles. There were days when hunting failed, and food was almost non-existent. But there were also days when the tribe successfully brought down a large animal. And when that happened, they would feast. They might consume hundreds of grams of protein in one sitting, followed by many hours or even days with very little food. If the human body truly wasted everything beyond 30 grams of protein, our species likely would not have survived very long. This evolutionary perspective begins to reveal an important truth. The human body was not designed for rigid nutritional rules. It was designed to adapt to constantly shifting cycles between scarcity and abundance, between fasting and feasting. When scientists examined more closely how the body processes protein compared with carbohydrates, they discovered that these two nutrients send very different biological signals. Carbohydrates, especially sugar and refined starches, trigger a powerful response in the body. When you eat them, blood sugar rises quickly. To manage this increase, the pancreas releases insulin. Insulin acts like a central broadcasting system, sending a message to nearly every cell in the body that energy is abundant. The message is clear: stop repair processes and begin storing energy. This is why high-sugar meals are often associated with reduced autophagy and increased fat storage. Protein behaves very differently. It does not send such a strong, system-wide signal. Instead, it activates very specific nutrient sensors, particularly those that detect amino acids. Insulin may rise slightly when protein is consumed, but this increase is nowhere near the level triggered by carbohydrates. As a result, the biological message sent by protein is not store energy everywhere. Instead, the signal is far more targeted: repair tissue, rebuild muscle, and restore cellular structure. This is where an especially fascinating mechanism appears, something many physiologists call the muscle sponge effect. When you fast for many hours or finish a demanding workout, your muscles enter a state of deep demand for building materials. They become like a completely dry sponge. When protein is consumed, amino acids are rapidly absorbed from the bloodstream into muscle tissue. The muscles essentially pull these amino acids in to begin the processes of repair and regeneration. This means that most of the protein you eat does not flood the entire body the way many people assume. Instead, it is preferentially delivered to the tissues that need it most. Because muscles absorb amino acids so aggressively, other organs such as the liver or fat tissue may never experience a true state of nutrient excess. This creates a very interesting biological condition. While muscles are operating in a growth and recovery mode, other parts of the body may still behave as if they are in a mild, nutrient-deprived state. And that means autophagy can continue to occur in those areas. In other words, the body may be capable of dividing its metabolism into two different operating modes at the same time. One important factor that allows this mechanism to function is an amino acid called leucine. Leucine is often considered a switch that activates muscle protein synthesis. However, as we age or when the body begins to develop insulin resistance, muscles become less sensitive to the signal of protein. This phenomenon is known as anabolic resistance. In that state, a small amount of protein, such as 20 or 30 grams, may no longer be strong enough to trigger the muscle-building response. The muscles become like a radio, with the volume turned too low to hear the signal. And to overcome that barrier, the body needs a stronger signal. That is when high-protein meals, around 50, 70, or even 100 grams of protein, begin to make biological sense. They act like a strong knock on the system, powerful enough to break through the signal resistance and force the muscles to respond. Yet what is fascinating is that when muscles receive this strong signal, they prioritize using amino acids for structural repair, rather than creating a state of excess energy throughout the entire body. As a result, instead of completely shutting down the cellular cleanup process, the body may maintain both processes at the same time: building and repairing. One of the reasons this discovery is so important is that it changes how we understand the relationship between muscle building and cellular cleaning. For many years, these two processes were seen as opposite extremes. Either you were repairing and recycling old structures through autophagy, or you were building new tissue through mTOR. But when scientists began to observe more closely how different organs in the body respond to nutrients, they realized that human biology is far more complex and flexible. The body is not a simple system where every cell receives the same signal at the same time. In reality, each tissue in the body can respond to nutrition in its own way. Imagine the body as a large city. In that city, some areas are constructing new buildings, some areas are repairing roads, and others are cleaning waste so the entire system can function more smoothly. All of these activities can happen at the same time in different districts. The same thing happens inside the human body. When muscles receive protein after a workout or after a period of fasting, they shift into recovery and growth mode. Meanwhile, the liver, fat tissue, and many other cells may continue their internal cleaning processes if the overall nutritional signal is not too strong. This is why protein, when used at the right moment, does not necessarily destroy the benefits of fasting as many people fear. However, the story becomes more complex when we look at people who carry a large amount of visceral fat. This is where research begins to show a different picture and where many people may recognize themselves in the story. When scientists studied individuals who were overweight or obese, they discovered a rather paradoxical finding. The genetic signals related to autophagy in their bodies, on paper, it appeared as though the body was trying very hard to activate its cellular cleaning system. But when researchers measured what is known as autophagic flux, the actual speed at which cellular cleanup takes place, they found that the system was almost blocked. In simple terms, the body is sending the command to clean, but the machinery responsible for carrying it out is not working properly. It is similar to turning the key in a car on a cold winter morning. You hear the click, click sound, but the engine does not start. The main reason for this phenomenon is often linked to chronic inflammation caused by visceral fat. Visceral fat is not simply an energy storage depot. It is actually a highly active endocrine tissue that releases many inflammatory molecules into the bloodstream. These inflammatory signals can damage mitochondria, disrupt communication between cells, and interfere with the repair pathways inside the cell. As a result, the body can fall into a harsh metabolic loop. Belly fat disrupts the cellular repair system. A weakened repair system makes metabolism less efficient. And when metabolism becomes less efficient, the body becomes even more prone to storing visceral fat. Over time, this cycle can make many people feel as though their bodies are working against their efforts to lose weight. Yet the important point is that this scientific discovery does not bring pessimism. On the contrary, it provides a clearer map for how to break that cycle. One of the most common mistakes people make when trying to lose belly fat is being afraid of protein. They assume that the less protein they eat, the stronger autophagy will become and the faster fat loss will occur. In reality, this approach can actually make things worse. When protein intake becomes too low, the body tends to lose muscle along with fat. And because muscle is one of the most important factors determining metabolic rate, losing muscle can slow fat loss over time. Protein also has a fascinating characteristic known as the thermic effect of food. When you eat protein, the body must expend a significant amount of energy simply to digest and metabolize it. On average, about 25 to 30% of the energy in protein is used up during this process. That means if you consume 1,000 calories from protein, the body may actually retain only about 700 calories after digestion and metabolism are complete. In contrast, when you eat 1,000 calories from sugar or fat, the body can store almost all of that energy. This is why a high-protein diet naturally tends to slightly increase metabolic rate without requiring any complicated strategies. In addition, protein strongly activates hormones that regulate satiety, especially GLP-1 and PYY. These hormones send signals to the brain, indicating that the body has received sufficient nutrition. This reduces hunger and helps limit overeating later on. If you look at the mechanism behind many modern weight loss medications, you will notice that many of them are essentially trying to mimic these very hormones. Interestingly, a protein-rich meal can activate this system naturally. This is also why the strategy for breaking a fast has begun to change in recent years. In the past, many common recommendations suggested that you should break a fast with very light foods, such as bone broth or a small amount of fat, in order to keep the body in ketosis. However, newer data suggests that a different approach may be more effective, especially for people who want to lose belly fat while preserving muscle. Instead of beginning with fat, a serving of lean protein may be a better choice. Foods such as chicken breast, whitefish, egg whites, or whey protein provide the amino acids muscles need without introducing a large surplus of energy into the system. When you break a fast with lean protein after a workout or after a prolonged fasting period, the muscles almost immediately begin using those amino acids to repair the microdamage caused by exercise. Meanwhile, because the meal contains relatively low amounts of carbohydrates and fat, the body does not receive a strong signal to store energy. This creates a very interesting metabolic state that some researchers describe as a metabolic hybrid state. In this condition, the body can simultaneously rebuild and repair muscle tissue while maintaining part of the cellular cleanup system. If you think about this in the context of everyday life, it begins to make a lot of sense. Many people today live in an environment where food is constantly available, yet our bodies still carry biological systems designed for cycles of change. When we combine reasonable fasting periods, physical training, and protein-rich meals, we are actually activating the adaptive mechanisms that our ancestors relied on for thousands of years. And when these mechanisms begin to function properly, something interesting happens. The body stops working against you. Instead, it begins working with you. Over time, as visceral fat gradually decreases, inflammation in the body also begins to decline. Mitochondria function more efficiently, metabolic signals become clearer, and the autophagy system that was once blocked begins to operate again. This is often the moment many people describe as when their body finally starts responding. Fat loss no longer feels like a constant battle. Energy becomes more stable, hunger becomes easier to manage, and maintaining muscle mass becomes easier. And perhaps this is the most important message of this entire body of research. The human body is not a fragile system waiting to be ruined by a single wrong meal. It is an incredibly adaptive system designed to handle environmental fluctuations. When we provide the right signals movement, adequate protein, and periods of rest from food, the body can activate several powerful biological processes at the same time: building, repairing, and regenerating. Once we begin to see the body from this perspective, the entire story of protein, fasting, and belly fat loss becomes much easier to understand. In real life, many people have experienced something very familiar. They try to eat less, cut calories aggressively, or even fast for long periods. Yet their bodies do not change as expected. At first, weight may drop slightly, but eventually everything seems to slow down. Energy declines, hunger increases, and maintaining the diet becomes more difficult each day. When this happens, many people believe the problem lies in their willpower, but in reality, the issue often lies in how we send biological signals to the body. The human body does not respond only to calories. It responds to the type of nutritional signals we provide. When the diet lacks sufficient protein for long periods, the body interprets this as a shortage of structural resources. In that situation, the body protects what it believes is necessary for survival, and ironically, body fat is often preserved as an energy reserve. At the same time, muscle mass, one of the most energy-demanding tissues, may begin to decrease. When muscle mass declines, the basal metabolic rate declines as well. This is when many people feel as if their bodies are slowing down. In contrast, when the body receives sufficient protein, especially after physical activity or after a reasonable fasting period, the biological message becomes completely different. The body recognizes that it has enough materials to maintain muscle structure. This creates a sense of biological security. When muscle is protected, the body has less reason to store energy in the form of fat. Over time, this can gradually shift metabolism toward greater fat burning. Interestingly, when you observe people with active lifestyles, you often see them unconsciously using this exact mechanism. They might train in the morning and then eat a protein-rich meal afterward. Not because they understand every biochemical pathway inside the body, but because their bodies naturally respond well to that pattern of eating. Satiety lasts longer. Energy remains more stable, and they are less likely to experience sudden cravings in the afternoon. This is not magic. It is simply biology functioning properly. Another factor that is often overlooked in discussions about protein is the role of muscle as a metabolic organ. Many people think muscles are simply tissues that allow us to move. In reality, muscle is one of the largest energy-consuming systems in the body. When you carry more muscle mass, your body requires more energy to maintain it. It is similar to having a larger engine in your car. Even when the car is moving slowly, that engine still consumes more fuel. Therefore, when a person protects and builds muscle through training and adequate protein intake, they are quietly increasing their body's daily energy expenditure. This does not happen overnight, but over time, it can make a significant difference. Someone who gains just a few kilograms of additional muscle may burn hundreds of extra calories each day without changing anything else in their lifestyle. This is also why combining reasonable fasting, physical training, and adequate protein intake can produce a much stronger effect than relying on any single factor alone. Fasting helps activate cellular cleanup mechanisms and improve insulin sensitivity. Exercise creates repair signals and stimulates muscle growth. And protein provides the building materials necessary for that recovery process. When these three factors appear together, the body receives a very clear message: rebuild stronger. From a biological perspective, this is exactly what the human body was designed to do. In nature, humans did not live in an environment where food was available 24 hours a day. They experienced periods of intense physical activity, followed by large, protein-rich meals after successful hunts. These cycles shaped how our bodies respond to nutrition. When we unintentionally recreate part of this cycle through modern lifestyles such as exercising, practicing intermittent fasting, and consuming adequate protein, we activate ancient adaptive mechanisms. One particularly interesting change that many people notice when applying this strategy is a shift in hunger patterns. When protein intake increases, the feeling of fullness tends to last much longer compared with meals dominated by refined carbohydrates. This is not merely a subjective sensation. Protein activates appetite-regulating hormones in the brain, making satiety signals clearer. When these signals function properly, portion control becomes more natural rather than relying entirely on willpower. In everyday life, this can be as simple as beginning the day with a meal that contains sufficient protein. For example, a breakfast of eggs, fish, or high-protein yogurt can keep energy levels far more stable than a breakfast consisting mainly of white bread or sweets. The difference may not be obvious during the first few hours, but by the afternoon, many people notice that they feel less tired and experience fewer sudden hunger spikes. When we step back and look at the bigger picture, we begin to see that the story of protein is not only about muscles. It is about how the entire metabolic system functions. When muscles receive enough amino acids, they become a flexible energy reservoir. They can absorb glucose more effectively, respond better to insulin, and help stabilize blood sugar levels. This reduces the burden placed on other organs, such as the liver and pancreas, allowing the entire metabolic system to operate more smoothly. Once this process begins, many other positive changes start to appear as well. Inflammation gradually decreases, energy becomes more stable, and recovery after exercise improves. This is often the point when many people realize that they no longer have to fight their bodies. Efforts that once felt incredibly difficult begin to feel easier, not because they suddenly became more disciplined, but because their biology has changed. What is important to remember is that there is no single nutritional strategy that works for everyone. Every body has a different history, environment, and activity level. But the new research on protein and autophagy reminds us of a fundamental principle: the human body is highly flexible. It can carry out multiple biological processes at the same time when it receives the right signals. So instead of looking at nutrition as a set of rigid rules, eat this and that process will shut off, perhaps a better approach is to understand how biological signals interact with one another. When you exercise, your muscles need materials to recover. When you fast for a reasonable period of time, the body activates cellular cleanup mechanisms. And when you eat enough protein at the right time, you may be able to support both of those processes. In the end, perhaps the most important message in this entire story is trust in the body's biological design. For many years, we have been taught to fear food, fear protein, fear fat, fear carbohydrates. But the human body was not designed to function in a constant state of nutritional fear. It was designed to adapt, repair, and recover when it receives the right signals. When you train hard, provide enough protein, sleep well, and give your body periods of rest from constant eating, you activate a powerful chain of biological responses. Muscle is protected, metabolism is elevated, and the cellular cleanup system has a chance to function more effectively. Over time, belly fat may decrease, energy may become more stable, and the body may begin to respond in ways many people once thought were impossible. And when you look back on that entire journey, you may realize something quite simple yet very powerful. Your body was never working against you. It was simply responding to the signals it was receiving. When those signals change, the results change as well. So, the next time you finish a workout or complete a fasting period, you may not need to fear a high-protein meal anymore. In many cases, it may be exactly the signal your body has been waiting for to begin a stronger process of recovery and regeneration. And once you understand this, something very interesting happens. You no longer feel as though you are trying to force your body to change. Instead, you are working together with an intelligent biological system that has evolved over millions of years. When given the right conditions, that system has the ability to build, repair, and protect you all at the same time. And that may be one of the most powerful biological advantages humans possess. When we look at the whole picture from beginning to end, an important shift begins to appear in the way we understand our bodies. For many years, many people approached fat loss with the mindset that they were fighting against their own bodies. They believed the body was always trying to hold on to fat, always resisting their efforts, and that the only way to win was to eat even less, fast even longer, and force themselves to be even more disciplined. But if you look at what new science is beginning to reveal, the story seems very different. The body is not your enemy. It is simply responding to the biological signals it receives. When the signal is prolonged energy deficiency, inadequate protein, and insufficient recovery, the body shifts into defense mode. It tries to conserve energy, lower metabolic rate, and protect important reserves. But when the signal changes, when the body receives the message that it has enough material to build, enough time to recover, and enough stimulus to become stronger, the entire biological system begins to shift direction. This is where the combined strategy of exercise, reasonable fasting, and adequate protein truly shows its power. After a workout, your muscles contain countless tiny micro-injuries at the level of muscle fibers. This is not a bad thing. In fact, it is exactly the signal that causes the body to become stronger. But for the repair process to happen, the body needs raw materials. Amino acids from protein act like building blocks, helping rebuild the structure of muscle tissue. When you provide protein at that exact time, the muscles almost immediately begin the recovery process. What is fascinating is that while the muscles are busy repairing and rebuilding their structure, many other systems in the body continue carrying out their own tasks. The liver continues managing energy, the immune system continues monitoring signs of inflammation, and other cells may still maintain autophagy if the overall nutritional signal is not too strong. This is exactly why new research shows that a high-protein meal, especially lean protein, does not necessarily cancel out all the benefits of fasting. In real life, many people have experienced this without realizing it. They begin exercising more regularly, increase the amount of protein in their meals, and naturally notice that their energy feels more stable. They feel less hungry between meals, experience fewer sudden cravings in the evening, and find it easier to maintain their weight. This is not the result of some magical secret. It is simply the result of the metabolic system beginning to function more efficiently. Another change often appears when the body starts losing visceral fat. Visceral fat, the fat surrounding the organs inside the abdomen, has a strong inflammatory effect. As the amount of this fat decreases, inflammation levels in the body also decline. The mitochondria, the energy factories of the cell, begin working more efficiently. And when mitochondria function well, the body produces energy more steadily. recovery improves, and many cellular repair systems also become stronger. This is the point when many people begin to feel a fairly profound shift. In the past, they felt tired all the time, easily became hungry, and found it difficult to control their weight. But as visceral fat gradually decreases and muscle mass is protected, that feeling begins to disappear. Energy throughout the day becomes more stable, sleep improves, and exercise capacity also gets better. This is often a sign that the metabolic system is returning to balance. Of course, this does not happen in just 1 or 2 weeks. The body needs time to adapt and repair. But when the right habits are maintained over many months, small changes begin to accumulate into major results. A few kilograms of fat go down, a few kilograms of muscle go up, and most importantly, the way the body uses energy begins to change. This brings us back to the most important message of the entire story. The human body is designed to adapt. It is not a fragile machine that can be ruined by one high-protein meal. On the contrary, it is an extraordinarily flexible biological system, shaped over millions of years to handle constant shifts between scarcity and abundance, between activity and rest. Once we understand this, the way we look at nutrition begins to change. Instead of asking, "Does protein destroy autophagy?" the real question should be, what biological signals are we sending the body every day? If the signals are movement, recovery, adequate protein, and periods of rest from constant eating, the body will activate a series of powerful processes that help us become healthier. And this is what makes this research so important. It helps free us from many unnecessary fears about food. It reminds us that protein is not the enemy of cellular cleaning. In many cases, it is exactly the factor that helps the body preserve muscle mass, stabilize metabolism, and create the conditions for repair systems to work more effectively. When you look at people with strong metabolic health, you often see a very similar pattern. They move regularly, they eat enough protein, they do not eat continuously all day, and they give their bodies periods of rest to recover. They may not know all the complex biochemical details behind those habits, but somehow they are doing exactly the things human biology was designed to respond to positively. So the next time you finish a workout or complete a fasting period, remember that your body does not need to fear protein. A meal rich in lean protein may be exactly the signal your body has been waiting for to begin a stronger process of repair and recovery. It provides materials for the muscles, activates hormones that regulate fullness, and helps the metabolic system function more efficiently. Over time, these small signals can create very large changes. Belly fat may gradually decrease. Energy throughout the day may become more stable, and the body may begin responding in ways many people once thought were impossible. And when you look back on that journey, you may realize something quite simple, yet very powerful. Your body has always wanted to recover and become stronger. It simply needs the right conditions to do so. So instead of fearing food, learn how to use it as a tool. Give your body quality protein, move regularly, and allow your metabolic system the periods of rest it needs. When these factors come together, the body can do what it was designed to do millions of years ago: build, repair, and protect you at the same time. And that may be the most important lesson modern science is gradually reminding us of. Not every old nutrition rule is wrong, but many of them are too simple to describe a biological system as complex as the human body. When we understand more deeply how nutritional signals work, we no longer have to choose between being strong today and being healthy in the long term. You can absolutely have both. Your body does not force you to choose between building muscle and maintaining cellular health. With the right strategy, those two processes can happen at the same time. And once you begin applying these principles to daily life, you may realize that your body is far more intelligent than the nutritional myths we have been taught to believe.